Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into my top starts and sits for the second week of the playoffs. This is obviously coming out on a Thursday afternoon with the whole NFL scheduling shifting, as I've already explained to you guys. So, why don't I just go ahead and get into this episode, especially since I am going to be talking about some players that will be playing in tonight's game between the Titans and 49ers. So, I'm just go ahead and dive into this episode. You guys know how this works, going through the quarterback, running back, wide receivers, and tight ends in order, just like I always have. So, let's start at that quarterback position, starting with my top starts of the week. I'm going with Matthew Stafford against the Vikings. Matthew Stafford's been playing good football over the last few weeks, and I think he can continue that against the Vikings on Sunday. The Vikings have allowed the third most allowed points per game to quarterbacks this year, giving up 18.9. They got a young secondary that lets up a lot of yards, so it's probably going to be setting up for a good night for those LA wide receivers. Spoiler alert on that. And I just think with how Matthew Stafford has played over the past few weeks, he kind of had a little bit of a rough outing. But when you got a guy like Cooper Kupp, he makes life easier on him. And he has the opportunity to put up a lot of points with not only Cooper Kupp, OBJ, Van Jefferson, even Tyler Higbee, and his running backs he can always dump off to for those points. So you got Matthew Stafford. He's probably gotten to you, got helped get you to this point. So I definitely would put him in your lineup this week. My other start, I'm going to go with Joe Burrow against the Ravens. The last time the Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals faced each other, Joe Burrow absolutely lit up the Baltimore Ravens secondary, and now they don't have Marlon Humphrey. I think Jimmy Smith is probably dealing with something. He's always kind of in and out of the lineup, and their secondary is absolutely decimated with injuries right now, and it's probably setting up for Joe Burrow to light them up once again on Sunday. When you look at the numbers, the Ravens are tied for the fifth most allowed points per game to quarterbacks this year, giving up 18.6. So after coming off that tough matchup against the Broncos last week, I think Joe is set to bounce back and have a huge game against Baltimore on Sunday. Moving on to my sits at the quarterback position. Now, this is a guy where, unless you're in a league like I am, where I have Josh Allen, but I'm lucky enough in that league. It's a small league, guy. I think it's eight. I think it's 8 or 10. It's a work league. I think it's like an 8 or 10 man team league. And I got Justin Herbert. So if you got like a Justin Herbert to play over Josh Allen, like yeah, you're gonna sit Josh Allen. Other than that, you probably drafted Josh Allen pretty high. He's helped get you to this point of the year, so you're more than likely going to play him. But definitely temper those expectations if he's in your lineup this weekend. He's going against New England. He had that rough game against New England a couple weeks ago. Now the weather obviously was awful, and he was actually he did a decent job for what the weather conditions were. But he is going against New England, who's allowed the fewest amount of points per game to quarterbacks this year, only giving up 11.6. So listen, if you happen to have a better option like I do in the league, I do own Josh Allen, I would consider playing them. Other than that, just temper your expectations, and then if he does ball out, it's just a benefit for you because he won in a tough matchup. My other sit, it's a guy that's been a nice streaming option for people throughout the year, but this is the week I would not stream him. It's Derek Carr against the Broncos. Broncos have a stingy defense, especially with the addition of Patrick Surtain, and they got Justin Simmons in the back end of that defense. They got a strong secondary now that people are getting healthier on that defense. And the Denver, they've allowed the third fewest amount of points per game to quarterbacks this year, only giving up 14.7. So if you've been streaming Derek Carr here and there throughout the year, you've been streaming quarterbacks, he's not an option for you. I would look elsewhere this week. So again, my top starts of the week: Matthew Stafford against the Vikings and Joe Burrow against the Ravens. My top sits: Josh Allen against the Patriots and Derek Carr against the Broncos. So let's go ahead, guys, and move into the running back position. Starting with my top starts, as always, I'm going with James Robinson against the Jets. Carlos Hyde just got placed on IR, so his season's done. They gave him touches last week, and they're probably going to give him all the touches this week, especially with Carlos Hyde being done for the season. And he's going against those Jets who have allowed the most points per game versus running backs this year, giving up 28.3. I mean, we saw Duke Johnson come out of the streets and have a career day against the Jets last week. So that sets up well for success for James Robinson. So if you rode him last week, ride him right into this week and help see if he can help carry you to the championship round. My other top starts, I'm going with both of these guys, Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon against the Raiders. These guys, they split their snaps, but they've shown us before that they can be both productive in the fantasy football realm, despite splitting the touches 50-50. Obviously, you want to own the guy that finds his way into the end zone. But this week, they are going against those Raiders who've allowed the third most allowed points per game to running backs this year, giving up 22.6. So I think there's enough to go around that both these guys can split those reps and get you fantasy football points. If you're looking for a running back to play, I definitely would consider Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon this week. And then moving on to my top sits for the second round of the playoffs. This includes tonight's game. It's Jeff Wilson Jr. against the Titans. Now, I will say this. I'm going to go ahead and be honest with you guys. I'm probably going to be stuck playing Jeff Wilson. And in the league, I got Josh Allen. I am actually going to have to probably be forced to play him. It's a league where I had Derrick Henry. I lost him. I just lost Leonard Fournette. I unfortunately was not able to get the claim on Ronald Jones over the waiver wires that processed overnight. So if you got Jeff Wilson Jr., you're stuck in a situation where you've lost your running backs, and this is a league too where I have Elijah Mitchell, right? So I picked up Jeff Wilson to help deal with the loss of Elijah Mitchell. And if you play him tonight, he's just going to have a rough matchup. He's going against one of the stingier defensive fronts in the league with Jeffrey Simmons, Nico Autry, Bud Dupree. I'm forgetting a guy, Harold Landry. He's more of a pass rusher, but they have a really good defensive front with really good set of linebackers and Jayon Brown and Rashaan Evans. So that's why they're so good against the run. And according to the numbers too, they have now taken over as the best defense against fantasy running backs this year. They have allowed the fewest allowed points per game against running backs, 13.9. So listen, if you're in a situation like me where you're kind of forced your hand and you kind of got to play Jeff Wilson because he's going to get the volume of touches, all you're going to be hoping for is he at least gets the touchdown, right? Like, please just get me a touchdown and hit your projected numbers. Like, that's all I'm hoping out of him. But if you're in a good situation where you can play somebody over Jeff Wilson, I would highly consider it this week. My other sits, I already talked about this last night. I still think Duke Johnson is worthy of a waiver wire add if you added him. But as I said last night, put him on your bench and see how this running back situation plays out between him and Myles Gaskin. So yeah, I am going to go ahead and say you should sit Myles Gaskin and Duke Johnson against the Saints this week or this Monday night. The Saints have been they were the stingiest defense, and then the Titans just took over that top spot, but they're still the second fewest allowed of points per game to running backs, only giving up 14.4. So it's a situation where, we don't know how this is going to work out. Like, sure, Duke dominated the touches last week, but as I said yesterday in my waiver wire video, we don't know if Myles Gaskin was coming off COVID and had conditioning issues, and they just let Duke ride the rock this past weekend against the Jets. So this is a game where we can see how they split these touches. If it's going to be a 50-50 stud, is Duke going to dominate it? Is Myles going to go back to being the lead back? And that's how you know where, when we get into the championship week, which one of these guys you can trust. So if you're able to, leave these guys on your bench and play somebody else if you can. So again, my top starts of the week, we got James Robinson against the Jets, and then Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon against the Raiders. My top sits, Jeff Wilson Jr. against the Titans, and Myles Gaskin and Duke Johnson against the Saints. Moving on to the top wide receiver starts. Obviously, with the Rams, I don't have to tell you guys to sit Cooper Kupp. He's basically in MVP talks right now, right? But his other compadres with OBJ and Van Jefferson against the Vikings, I think they're both good plays this week. The Vikings have been the worst defense against fantasy wide receivers this year so far. They've allowed the most points per game to wide receivers, giving up 27.8 points a game, so almost giving up 30 points a game. So there's plenty of points to go around between OBJ, Van Jefferson, and Cooper Kupp. That's why Matthew Stafford, again, he's a good play too. So if you got the Rams quarterback, you got one of those Rams wide receivers, leave them in your lineup this week. They got a good matchup where they can hit their ceiling this week. My other start, same thing. You know, with Cooper Kupp, same thing with Deebo Samuel, right? You don't have to question if you're going to play Deebo Samuel. He has proved himself. He's having that year 3 boom I talked about back in August. So you don't want to question playing Deebo Samuel, but his counterpart in Brandon Ayuk. I understand. I was talking with somebody in the comment section in the video yesterday where they have the concern with Brandon Ayuk only having the 1 catch last week. I try not, for me anyways, I try not to read too much in the just recent game. And if they have a juicy matchup, I'm always kind of willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and roll the dice with it. And I think you can roll the dice with Brandon Ayuk tonight against the Titans. According to the numbers, they have allowed the second most allowed points per game to the wide receiver position, giving up 26.2. Now, I'm sure some of that's going to pull George Kittle's way. Obviously, Deebo Samuel is going to get some of that, but Brandon Ayuk could get a good portion of those 26 points too. That they are giving up per game. And then, like I just talked about with Jeff Wilson, the Titans defense, what they're really good at defending the run and dominating the trenches, but they're back into the defense. Despite having guys like Kevin Byard and Christian Fulton, they can still give up a lot of passing yards, and that's where their leaky holes come in their defense. So I think Brandon Ayuk might have a good, I'm going to go ahead and say, I think Brandon Ayuk does have a blow-up spot tonight against the Titans. As a Colts fan, I'm hoping it happens, but I do think based on the numbers, he could be a sneaky good play for you this week. Now, my sits, I'm going with Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney against the Eagles. Honestly, I don't know if anybody's been playing the Giants wide receivers. I hope you have not been. But if this is a week maybe you're thinking about it, don't do it. They're going against the Eagles this week. They're down to, I don't know who's going to start because Jake Fromm ended up coming into that last game. I don't know if it's going to be Jake Fromm or Mike Lennon. Either way, you're talking about second or third string quarterbacks throwing them the ball. So you got guys that you don't know if you could trust getting them the ball consistently. Then they are going against the Eagles, where if you look at the numbers, the Eagles have allowed the third fewest amount of points per game to wide receivers this year, only giving up 17.4. So it is a rough matchup for those two. So if you had any, thought of playing either Kadarius Toney with him returning from his injury or with Kenny Golladay kind of doing something at the end of the game with Jake Fromm last week, I would highly consider looking elsewhere for a different option. My other sits, I am going to go with the trio of wide receivers in Denver, the Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Tim Patrick against the Raiders. It's kind of hard to project which one of those Broncos wide receivers are the play of the week in fantasy football. It seems like, Tim Patrick got the touchdown last week, and then Courtland Sutton's kind of been quiet over the past month. Jerry Jeudy really hasn't. I don't even really think it's either of these guys' faults. I just think it's the quarterback situation. Like Teddy, he's good. He's a good, game manager, but he's not looking to push down the ball down the field. They got their 2 stud running backs, so they lean on the running game, right? So there's not a lot of opportunity for these guys to put up the numbers. And then it's more likely going to be Drew Lock starting this week. So I don't trust that situation. And then when you look at the numbers, the Raiders have been, one of the stingier defenses against wide receivers this year. They have tied for the 4th fewest allowed points per game to wide receivers, only giving up 18 points. So if that stands this week, there's not a lot of points to go around between those 3 wide receivers. So if you have one of them, I would look at other options to play this week. So again, my top starts: OBJ and Van Jefferson Jr. against the Vikings and Brandon Ayuk against the Titans. My sits: Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney against the Eagles, and Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Tim Patrick against the Raiders. All right, let's go ahead and move into the last segment of the video, the top starts for the tight end position. I'm actually going to go with that, who I think is going to be the guy to get some of the receiving production. I'm going with Noah Fant against the Raiders. So as good as the Raiders are defending the pass on the outside of things, because Denzel Perryman, he's a good against the run, but he's not really a good coverage linebacker for the Raiders. And their safeties, Trevor Morris kind of getting the game down, but Jonathan Abram just got put on IR, but he's not really a good coverage safety anyways. So that's why I think tight ends are able to get the production against the Las Vegas defense. So if you look at the numbers, though, the Raiders, they have allowed the 3rd most allowed points per game to the tight end position, giving up 10.9. They almost gave up that touchdown to David Njoku against the Browns on Monday night. And I think actually didn't Harrison Bryant, I think he caught a touchdown in that game. So yeah, so the tight ends have been a good play against the Raiders this year. So I think Noah Fant is a good play. I am playing him in my main money league that I lost T.J. Hawkinson. So come on, Noah Fant, pull through for me. My other start though, I hope he doesn't go off as a Colts fan. It would ruin my Christmas. But I will admit the Colts have a difficult time covering tight ends. Hunter Henry just had a big game against the Colts last week with his 2 touchdowns. And Zach Ertz against the Colts is setting up for a good matchup. They don't have DeAndre Hopkins anymore, so he's kind of setting up for a good fantasy run to help people win a championship. And when you look at the numbers, Indianapolis has allowed the 4th most allowed points per game to tight ends this year, giving up 10.5. Andrew Sendejo sucks at covering as a safety, so he's kind of the reason why, I'll admit Darius Leonard, he gets his interceptions, he gets his pass deflections, but he still kind of has his moments where he can struggle in coverage. That's why he would just barely miss a couple tips on those Hunter Henry touchdowns. He just barely. But yeah, it's setting up where Zach Ertz could have a good game against Indianapolis on Christmas night. My top sits. These guys are playing against each other, but I'm going to go with Dawson Knox against the Patriots. Dawson Knox had that rough game against New England a couple weeks ago. He had plenty of opportunity. He just kept on dropping the ball, so he actually maybe might be able to be a good play, but but with that being said, Cole Beasley's out of this matchup, as well as probably Emmanuel Sanders, so that can allocate more defensive eyes on Dawson Knox. And then when you look at the numbers, New England has allowed the 3rd fewest amount of points per game to tight ends, giving up 4.6 a game. So if you're going to stream Dawson Knox, I don't think this is the week to do it. And the same thing goes for Hunter Henry against the Bills. I know Hunter, like I just talked about, Hunter Henry just came off that huge game against the Colts with his 2 touchdowns. But that's the thing. Hunter Henry has been a touchdown-dependent fantasy tight end this year. So you got to hope that he gets the touchdown against Buffalo if you do play him, because look at the numbers. Buffalo is tied for the 4th fewest amount of points per game to tight ends this year, giving up 4.9. So if you're looking at Hunter Henry, because trust me, I was looking at him. He was on the waiver wires. I ended up going with Noah Fant over Hunter Henry, but I was still looking at him like, man, he just caught those 2 touchdowns against the Colts. I should probably play him. Now, I just think that's the thing. Hunter Henry, one week he gets you some points, and the next week he only gets you like 3 or 4 receptions for like 30 or 40 yards. So that could be the outcome. He's, again, like him and Knox are guys that if you do play them this week for any reason, you better hope they get the touchdown, because otherwise the production might not be there for you. So again, my top starts at tight end, Noah Fant against the Raiders and Zach Ertz against the Colts. My top sits, Dawson Knox against the Patriots and Hunter Henry against the Bills. So yeah, that's my top starts and sits for this week. If anybody's taking their time to watch my video today, I always appreciate it, especially when it's the holiday week, when it's Christmas week. I know people are like, this is a day that people are probably traveling. You guys are pretty busy. So if anybody did take their time to watch this video, I really appreciate the support. As always, as I ask, if you enjoyed today's video, hit that like button. If this is your first time watching my video, you've been impressed by me, please hit the subscribe button. I know it's the end of the fantasy season, but I do my weekly previews. I am going to be doing, more deep. I'm not sure exactly how, but I'm going to be more focused on the playoff videos as well. I got some off-season content I may create. I'm kind of brainstorming on that. But what I am going to be doing in the off-season in the coming months is a lot of draft-related content. So I will announce plans as they come to me. So stay tuned for that. As always, if you guys have any fantasy-related questions or NFL questions, feel free to hit up the comments like some of you guys do. I do want to shout out Ryan, who's been a loyal listener of mine. He actually brought it to my attention that I guess the settings on my Twitter did not allow some people to message me. So if you guys did go to message me on Twitter at any point of this year and you weren't able to, that setting has been changed. So you should be able to DM. I've been DM with Ryan, who asked to reach out to me. So he's been able to get in contact with me. So if anybody's been looking to reach out to me on Twitter, that setting should have changed, and you should be able to slide into my DMs to talk football or whatever. I'm always open to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. So feel free to hit me up there. My follow is at Cody Talks NFL. Other than that, I'm gonna get out of here, get off of here and get this edited and uploaded. I just realized I had to fix something on my graphic. that I made earlier this morning for one of the segments. So I do need to get off here and get that fixed. And then I will be back tomorrow. I'm gonna do my weekly preview tomorrow morning after I have my morning coffee. So stay tuned for that. I'll see you guys then, and you guys enjoy today. And if you guys don't watch my video tomorrow, have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate. Enjoy the weekend. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.